I pulled some numbers and I fact checked these with these guys earlier today. I was just curious, like, okay, snowmobile related fatalities, Canada versus the U.S. over the last 3 years. Pulled them from the avalanche.org and then avalanche.ca website. Pretty reputable sources there.
Mm-hmm. Trustworthy sources.
Trustworthy sources. So 2023, all right. Canada 2 snowmobile fatalities in 2020. So this last season, 2023, versus the U.S. 9. 2022. So we go back another year. We've got 1 snowmobile fatality. Verse 6 in the U.S. And then in 2021, 4 in Canada and 9 in the U.S. So no matter which way you're slicing this up, the U.S. is at least twice as many avalanche fatalities caused by snowmobilers versus Canada. So the question that I think the two next questions are why? And or is it just a law of averages? Is there twice as many mountain snowmobilers in the Rocky Mountain states, right?
Well, you're going after user days. It's really the conversation that you got to consider is how many user days to how many fatalities in an area.
Yeah.
And that could kind of give you that base number. And that's a number that is really hard to get. Sure. You know, is there more user days in an area in Utah compared to an area in, let's say, British Columbia?
When you say user days, just to be clear, that is days that you can ride that snowmobilers are riding
in an area. So let's say if you took like one spot in Utah and said there's 300,000 user days here to every 2 fatalities, that would be a number that you could work with and learn from. And we don't really, especially in Canada or the U.S., that really have that user day number to really fully understand the scope of mountain snowmobiling.
Yeah, because if that was accurate and readily available, that's a super good number to just know and be like, we're struggling here. We need to really step it up, you know?
So I did a comparable like that for just in Canada in the 2000s versus 2010s and then now the 2020s. So I didn't do it in the States, but I looked through the decades there and got the user days versus fatalities for my own knowledge. So there's a trend there we can talk about after, but I think what you're going after was like States versus Canada.
Yeah, so I do in my own, I can theorize from my own experience. If we're in this for over 25 years of riding and probably 15 years of avalanche education and watching the numbers shift, you know, but you want to go with solid data. Yeah, there's a large increase in fatality of motorized use in the U.S. And in Canada, we've done a good job at reducing that. But if you look at our numbers in the early 2000s, we had a real big uptick.
A lot.
And so in the early 90s in the British Columbia backcountry, we had a big influx of skiing and snowboarding and recreational activities. So that's where the first real avalanche rec courses originated from. And I was a part of that influx in the early 90s on the snowboard and doing a lot of that activity. And the death tolls were really up between 90 to 95. So then they developed a recreational avalanche course and
for skiers.
And that started taking effect, and that made a good help. But a nice comparison is 2000 to 2005 snowmobile fatalities in Canada. Another huge uptick. And we started losing a large number of people. And so it was heavily on the public's radar or government radar as well as all the news broadcasts and local public. And then we had a black swan event within what they called the Big Iron Shootout Avalanche, where we had potentially 180 people buried and only 2 lost
Boulder
their
Mountain,
lives.
2010.
So that's why they call it a black swan event. Wow. It leaves the ether of a culture after about 10 years. So there's a lot of those smart people out there that understand that human mentality culture. And so in Canada, we're trying to revamp up with the idea of that black swan event, Boulder, being gone from the ether of the culture, saying, okay, well, we need to re-educate, re-push our marketing and awareness before we have another major event.
But that's where our culture here shifted. That's where we realized we needed to have more awareness and education for snowmobilers specifically, and it kind of took a shift there. And I can't speak for the States, but I don't know if that
There's not
shift
that-
has
I
happened.
don't think that I'm not aware of something as
No,
drastic
nothing
as
of that magnitude has really happened to the motorized community in the U.S. And I think there's also the population base and how it's spread out through your mountainous regions is one thing. You definitely have a spread out of avalanche culture and avalanche organizations that do their best to message it to the motorized community, even though a lot of them are ski snowboard based and the cultures have two different approaches. So those organizations are trying to get themselves articulated so they're reaching to the motorized community in that messaging. And what you have is 2000, we get Ferraris. So instead of just driving an old Chevelle, we now have something that has, not bolting plastic to them anymore. We have tracks, we have mountain-specific machines. So does our education match the machine? No. But we do have a culture that, avalanches haven't really bothered us until about 96.
Because we couldn't get anywhere when it stormed.
Yeah.
Our sleds couldn't take us there.
So
when it stormed, yeah.
why to where we currently are in the numbers that you run are different? Why was Canada successful? We have a strong mountain guiding community that's quite big, and the avalanche culture in the U.S. is really based around the ski hill cultures that mitigate avalanches for recreational use. Here we have a bunch, in Canada, we have a bunch of recreational professional guides. So there was this big, strong avalanche understanding how to mitigate the problem, which was a help. And then those people were in conjunction starting to develop that concept. And since we had these big events happening and a lot of people dying, we started figuring out how awareness would work, how communication tactics would work, and how we could reduce the fatalities. So, and it's a huge economic driver for our province. And since we only are one province, we have less government organizations to work with and a bunch of stuff like that and bureaucracy to get through. So we were able to shift, adjust, and create the proper messaging and start morphing the culture and culture shift. And we've been successful with that, I would say. But when you bring up numbers like that, there's a lot of variable. There's snowpack variation there. There's the user days that we can't really condone. So unless you have a good, solid user-based number, then you can't really understand if your fatalities are increasing or not.
Yeah.
So maybe it's still the same percentage of fatalities, just more users.
Exactly.
But either way, no fatalities. Like in my opinion, you can ride a snowmobile and really extremely reduce your risks if you understand how to drive that snowmobile in Tokyo. But nobody taught you about the rules of the road in Tokyo. And we're still missing that a little bit. Like a lot of ski culture that's trying to transfer our avalanche culture over is...
not hitting with the sledders.
Well, they don't know how to teach them how to apply it because they don't do the sport. So we need more avalanche professionals that do the sport that can understand how to instruct, how to apply that knowledge. Yeah. Otherwise, without application, there is no retention for the person learning. So I think there's a miss in the delivery and the content in general in motorized avalanche education that hopefully will upswing soon. So helping shift the avalanche culture about what needs to be developed for motorized use as well.